All right, so meat and bones of South Chittenden River Watch volunteer water quality sampling. I'm having trouble clicking through my screen here. There we go. Okay, so South Chittenden River Watch began in 2004 and has done a variety of sort of sampling methods, if you will. So in 2004 until about 2014, we did sort of random sampling, like collect samples no matter what flow was happening. It could have been a high flow, like a storm event. It could have been low flow or just sort of in between. And that was just to sort of establish a baseline of what, data we were looking at. We sample in a variety of watersheds. I'll show you some maps here in a minute, but that includes the La Platte, McCabe's Brook, Thorpe and Kimball Brooks, which drain into the lake in Charlotte, Holmes and Monroe Brooks, and a variety of other brooks that are sort of tributaries of these larger systems. We share data pretty widely, so that includes, our partners like in our towns, regional planning commissions, state DEC. Our program is actually run and sort of like overseen, I guess, if you will, by the US EPA. So the EPA also gets the data that we collect. And so, our data gets used and shared very widely. And of course, we have our sister sampling group, the Addison County River Watch Collaborative. Addison County River Watch is essentially becoming their own 501c3. They're going through that process right now. And so we're sort of separating a little bit in that they used to collect our water quality data on Lewis Creek. And now we're actually going to start doing that collection of those data ourselves this year. So we're adding some sites in Starksboro along Lewis Creek. And that will, switch things around for some of you who have been doing this for a long time on, your sites locally. Wanted to show you or mention this to you briefly. Down at the bottom of the screen, the 2021 data is now available as of like 3 hours ago. It's very exciting. We have a new story map, which is essentially a way to look at water quality data by like scrolling through and looking. There are like graphs and maps and also visuals, photographs and that type of thing that sort of describe the data that we all collected in 2021. So again, the data itself is only for 2021, but it's a really nice visual way to see, what's going on near you or what's going on at the site where you collected data. It talks about all three of the parameters that we collected data for: phosphorus, nitrogen, and chloride. And it's definitely worth checking out. If you guys want to stay around, I'm happy to, sort of walk you through that at the end, but I don't want to go into detail right now. So feel free to check out that website if you want and send me your feedback because it is really, really brand new. You guys are the first ones to see it. Okay, so similar to last year, we're going to have 16 sampling stations. We had 15 last year. We're going to be doing 8 regular biweekly samples, so every other week, and 2 high flow or storm samples. So those are 2 events where, like, when there's a lot of rain coming, maybe it's going to rain hard all night, and I anticipate that the rivers are going to come up. I'll call you or email you the day before and say, okay, tonight looks like a good night. We're going to sample in the morning, and it won't be on like our regular schedule. So it might be on a Wednesday or on a Friday, which sometimes means that some people can't do it. And I have to shuffle folks around and try to like cover bases to make sure we can all, get our high flow storm samples in. There were some changes to our sampling plan for this year, which is based on what the state, the Department of Environmental Conservation approves out of what I submit for our proposal. So they've suggested that we have plenty of data on McCabe's Brook at this point. And so they've removed our McCabe's Brook stations. They've also removed 2 of our La Platte River stations, LP3 and LP5. So that means a couple of those are going away, at least for the time being. Presumably they'll be able to come back in a few years, like after maybe if there's some land use changes or things that we anticipate we'll be able to see like a change in water quality, then we can go back and sample those locations again. But for right now, those 3 stations were removed from our sampling for this year. But we did add 5 stations. So we have 5 new stations, well, new to me anyways, in the headwaters of Lewis Creek and its tributaries. So that's primarily Starksboro and 1 or 2 in Heinsberg as well. So that's kind of cool. It should be nice to get up into those, you know, really like forested, generally pretty good quality streams and check out, you know, what water quality is doing there. That'll be done sort of in conjunction with DEC. They do some collection of data about the invertebrates and the fish in the stream, so they can kind of collect those data in conjunction with our water quality data. Okay, so hopefully you guys can at least sort of see this. It's probably fairly small on your screens, but I wanted to give you just the overview of the map. So you're looking at a topo map with Shelburne up sort of in the upper left of your screen. The water body up at the top is Lake Champlain. This is Shelburne Bay. So moving upriver, we have 2 stations sort of in the lower La Platte. So this is, sorry, I should have mentioned, this is all the La Platte watershed. So we have LP1 and LP2 down near the mouth of the La Platte. And then as you go upstream, again, we've lost a couple of stations in here. LP3 and LP5 are now gone. We have 2 stations on Mud Hollow Brook, which is a tributary to the La Platte. So MH1 and MH2. And the La Platte continues up this way, crosses into Heinsberg. And once you get into Heinsberg, we have LP13, which is a tributary that comes in, actually starts up here in St. George, essentially, and comes in this way down to the La Platte. And then you come further up the La Platte to the wastewater treatment facility, that's LP9, and LP10 up here along Silver Street in Heinsberg. And then we also have 2 stations on Patrick Brook. So PB stands for Patrick Brook, and that's one of our tributaries into the La Platte as well. So those all have remained the same from last year. Just a quick close up, we're looking here, we're going to start at the top of the watershed and work our way back down. So Heinsberg, we've got these essentially 5 stations. Mud Hollow coming into the La Platte, and those 2 lower Shelburne La Platte stations. Okay, and then just to show you the Lewis Creek stations now, just so you're all sort of familiar with where that is. Again, you're looking at this sort of overview map. On the left side of your screen is Lake Champlain, where Lewis Creek drains in. You've got Lewis Creek coming up this way, looping through Charlotte and through Heinsberg. And as you come up here, you see one of our major tributaries, which is Hollow Brook, which starts way over here in Starksboro off the map, and Huntington comes down. Oh no, I'm sorry. It starts right in here, comes down this way and drains into Lewis Creek. So we have 2 stations here. That's Hollow Brook. And then we come up higher, up Lewis Creek. This is Route 116 now that you're sort of paralleling. You've got High Knob Brook, which again starts here in Starksboro and drains in. And then we've got 2 stations here along Hillsboro and the Lewis Creek sort of main stem, the upper parts of the watershed. So again, that's sort of close up. This is Route 116 running north and south in the red. We've got the Hillsboro Brook up here. Lewis Creek here near the bottom of Hillsboro Road, and High Knob Brook station here. And then those 2 Hollow Brook stations where it comes in sort of in South Heinsberg here and here along Tyler Bridge Road. All right, so what we're actually doing, sampling is starting a little bit earlier this year. It's going to start April 25th is our first sampling date as of now. Could change, subject to change, but hopefully sticking with that, April 25th, and then every other Monday morning after that till August 1st, which is our last sampling date. Just like last year, we'll be sampling 3 different parameters: phosphorus, nitrogen, and chloride. And same sort of drop-off situation where you'll take your samples either to Joanna's house in Shelburne or to my house in Heinsberg by 9 a.m. And of course, letting me know and your partners know if you can't sample on a certain date, so we can try to arrange, you know, a backup person to take that sample for you. And then, like I mentioned, for the high flow sampling, I'll be in touch with you by 6 p.m. the night before, so that we can make sure we can get out there and grab those high flood sort of storm events. All right, now the bottles. You guys probably all remember this stuff, but we're gonna do it again anyways, because it never hurts to refresh. If you have all 3 parameters on your site, you will have 3 bottles in your bag. One of them, the phosphorus bottle, is glass, and you can feel that. That's the one here on the bottom with the white cap and the sort of black line around the top. And then you have 2 other bottles that are plastic, one of them for chloride with a purple cap and one for nitrogen with a blue cap. The way I always remember it is that the glass bottle, you don't have to rinse it out or do anything with it. You just take your sample right into the glass bottle. With the 2 plastic bottles, you have to do what's called a triple rinse for those bottles. So they get, you know, dipped in the water and that water tossed out 3 different times. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. And then, you know, those get filled up almost to the top with just a little bit of headspace. The phosphorus bottle, you fill just to that black line. All right, so what are you doing when you're actually out there? First of all, you're going to have your bottles with, there will be a label on each one. So on that bottle and on the field form, you're going to write down what date it is, what time it is, and your name. You're writing usually with ballpoint pen, because if you use, you know, just like a standard ink pen, it's going to probably bleed and make a big mess and be hard to read. So nice cheapo ballpoint pen that you can grab at your nearest hotel or bank. You're going to sample near the center of the stream if you can successfully get there. Some of you are sampling on large rivers where getting to the center of the stream is nearly impossible and quite unsafe. You want to try not to disturb the sediment in the bottom of the stream. And you're going to face upstream, so the water is flowing down towards you, which is what's shown in the picture here. You'll hold your bottle down at the bottom, so you're not touching that bottle opening or the cap with your fingers. Hold that bottle upside down over the water and then dip it sort of in like a U shape away from you or away from your body. That dip should be about at least 8 inches deep, or if it's really shallow, just about halfway between the surface and the bottom of the stream. As I mentioned, for the plastic bottles, so for phosphorus, or I'm sorry, for nitrogen and chloride, you're going to fill your bottle up, put that cap on, give it a little shake, and then dump the water out behind you downstream. You're going to do that 3 times. So dip, dump, dump. And then eventually, after you've done your 3rd dump, then you can fill that bottle up and cap it and keep your sample. Some of you who are on those really large river systems may have a long pole with a bottle on the end that's useful for taking those samples. If you're using that long pole with a bottle, you need to triple rinse that bottle that's on the pole, as well as your other little bottles, so that, you know, everything is nice and clean with, well, clean anyways, with the stream water. And then you can grab your sample into that large bottle that's on the end of your pole and pour it into the other triple rinsed smaller bottles, the sample bottles. If you fill up, let's say you fill up your phosphorus bottle and it's way above that black line, you just have too much water in there. Instead of pouring it off, they recommend that you just kind of flick the bottle. So you just kind of give it a little, shake or whatever, so that a little bit spills out until you get to that required amount, and then put your cap on. Sometimes those caps are a little finicky, especially those plastic ones. So just, kind of make sure it's seated on there flat and straight instead of being crooked and leaky. You should have a cooler with you with some ice packs in it that, ideally you put those ice packs or keep them in the freezer the night before, so they're nice and cold. No free floating ice in your coolers. And, obviously make sure your bottles are all full before you leave the site, and then bring it to one of those regular drop-off locations that I will send out in email to either Joanna's house or my house in Heinsberg. There will be a cooler outside for you to drop your samples in and leave your data sheet with the samples as well. Okay, so I tried to make some pretty pictures this year, because I knew it got a little complicated sometimes with like, what was a lab duplicate and what do I do with this duplicate? And it's still confusing. So the lab duplicate really stands out to me because it does have this weird label. So it's pretty obvious, like this is not one of my normal bottles, which looks more like this one sort of down here at the bottom. So on these lab duplicate, really all you have to do is check off that you're taking a total phosphorus or a TP sample. So you check the TP box. You write down where you are, so that the site ID number, like if you're at LP9 or whatever, you're going to write that down there. And again, same sort of thing, you'll write your date and time as well on this bottle. And then on the data sheet, which I'll show you in just a sec, there's also a little box for checking off that you've taken a duplicate, a lab duplicate sample at that site. So you don't have to do anything like particular on your data sheet other than just check that little box on the right that shows that you've taken a lab duplicate. There's another kind of duplicate that's just called a duplicate. And it is designated by this little D in the middle of your label. So if you ever pull out your set of bottles and you go, okay, I have this one that says phosphorus and I have this one that says phosphorus, what's the difference? One of them probably is one of these D or duplicate samples, and then you have one that says R in the middle that's for a regular sample. Not a big deal. They get taken the same way out of the stream. Really, you're just taking them sort of at the same time or out of the same, same bottle of water if you have one of those large bottles that you're pouring off into. But for this one, you'll actually it'll have its own like separate line on the data sheet because it has a separate number here on the label. So you just kind of designate that one independently on the data sheet. And then there's a third kind of weird bottle, which is the blank bottle. If you end up with a blank bottle, it'll say B here in the middle instead of D, B for blank. And you'll have a special bottle of water that comes with that blank bottle that's called deionized water. That deionized water comes in like just like a large, almost like an old Nalgene bottle. If you guys ever had those, sort of opaque Nalgenes. That's what it looks like to make a large quart-sized Nalgene bottle. So for those, again, if you have a chloride or a nitrogen, you're going to triple rinse with that DI water. And then you're just going to fill the bottle up with DI water. That's all there is to it. There's no, no special things that need to be done with that. Just straight DI water, no stream water in those guys. And that's just so the lab can tell that, there was no like contamination, that water should just read with no phosphorus. It shouldn't have nitrogen, it shouldn't have anything in it. It's just sort of pure water. Okay, so as we just talked about the labels, there are all these crazy numbers on there, and some those numbers sort of get designated in different places on your data sheet that help me when I go around to sort bottles and make sure that we have all the samples that we need. So data sheet, I know it's probably hard to see all the little words on there. But as you go through this, I think most of it's pretty self-explanatory. At the top, you're writing in your basic information, like your date, what the air temperature is, the lab sample ID, which I'll tell you about in just a minute, how long it took you to do all your sampling. That includes like any prep time, if you, I don't know, had to stick labels on your bottles or get your cooler ready to go or whatever, and your driving time to your site and back home again. And that's just for our purposes so that we know how much volunteer time we're spending, I guess, if you will. Your names, who, everyone who's out there, and you can circle who, the team leader, if you have a team leader, I guess. Field notes. So anything that you notice out there about the stream or about the surrounding land use, like maybe they're spreading manure that day, or there's beavers have built a new dam and your site is way underwater beyond what it usually is. There's muddy ditches that are draining, water in upstream. Those sorts of things are all useful for us to know. And then you have 2 lines about what the weather is. So current weather conditions and what it's been doing the last 24 hours. And then you get into the actual like water quality data here, where you're writing some info about your bottles, what time it is, what the temperature in the river is. You have some flow categories and flow level information, which are described pretty well down below here, because that can get a little bit confusing. It's worth reading these descriptions really thoroughly when you're out there, and making your best judgment about, what the stream looks like, and how much, what's happening with the flow. Is it rising or falling, which would be called a freshet, because it's been raining, or I suppose due to snow melt, or is it just sort of like we haven't had any rain in a while, just sort of base flow. And then you're going to make a call about turbidity. So that's, can you visibly see that there's sediment in the water? Is it muddy brown, or is it pretty clear? You can see through. That's just a yes or no question. And then you'll just check off the boxes for those samples that you collected. TP for total phosphorus, TN for total nitrogen, chloride, and again, that funny lab dupe bottle. That's just that sort of empty, different looking label. Okay, so I just wanted to call out all these different numbers, because there's 3 different places where you're writing in numbers off your bottle. And I intended for it to be simple, but it's not really all that simple. So I'm going to call it out here with some pictures on the actual bottle label, so you can see where those numbers come from. So the lab sample ID, the first thing you write down is off the bottle, the first 7 numbers. So it's actually this number right here. It's 7 numbers long, if that helps you, because some of these other numbers are like 6 digits long. So 7 numbers, sample ID. And then you got to fill in your La Rosa ID, which is this sort of long, like 3-part code. So that's this thing here on your bottle. Like I said, it includes sort of your site information, what type of sample it is, the R or the D, or the B, and then this, I guess, ID that you're more familiar with, which is something like LP9 or MB1. Those are the actual like site locations, or what we call the site locations. Okay, and then that third thing you're going to write down is just these last 3 numbers on the same code. And that just helps me, because when I take your samples in, the lab gives me a sheet that I have to fill out that's organized by these last 3 numbers in order. So it helps me if I can like just go through your data sheets and find number 2. Okay, yep, it's this one. And then I sort out all the bottles and get them organized to send to the lab. So I'm sorry to make you write down so many numbers. It is a hassle, but helpful in the scheme of things. And if you don't, if you're out there and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't remember what number to write down in which box, is not a big deal at all. If you can just get these numbers somewhere on that, on that line, that is helpful. Just so I can take, your sample and your data sheet and know where you were, and make sure that they correspond. That's the most important thing. So it doesn't matter if they're exactly in those boxes in the right spots, but helpful if they can be. Okay, so you're going to need some supplies. I have some sampling poles and grabbers here at my house. I think some people dropped things off at the end of last season. So tell me if you would like one of those for your site, if you're familiar with your site already. Or if you dropped things off with me that you want back, please just shoot me an email and tell me what those things are so I can get them back to you. We have some thermometers. I think some of you guys probably have thermometers at home, but we have some extras. You'll need a clipboard, data sheets I can print off and supply. You'll need a couple of ice packs and a cooler. Again, I have a few of these here from last year, and we can always get more if needed. Ballpoint pen, and of course your bottles, which will come at some point from the lab, and I will get together, the bottles for your team and get those out to you in some fashion. I don't know exactly when that's going to happen yet. I don't have a lot of word or a lot of details yet from the lab about how that is all going to happen, but we'll figure that out. At some point in the next, few weeks, I will get all of our information put onto a Google Drive, and I'll also send it in an email. So that'll include like the data sheet, maps, site locations, the contact sheet of all the samplers with our phone numbers and emails and all that stuff, so you can be in touch with your team, and some documents that talk about the sampling procedures, so you know generally what to do. I tentatively put together some teams and some site assignments. This will probably change, but this is sort of a tentative idea here. Some of you guys are on the same sites as you were in the past, and some of you have been combined or moved around to new sites. And I know we have some folks who are here tonight who are just here to learn and may or may not be interested in sampling. So if you are, I will get you added to one of these teams, so you can have a group to sample with, and we can, split up sampling sites as well. Like some of these folks have a couple different sites, and we can make it so that everyone has a chance to get out there and sample. Again, after this, just make sure that I have your information and that it's correct on that sort of team contact sheet that I'll send out. Make sure you know your teammates' contact info. There are a couple of resources here. I'll send this PowerPoint around too, so you don't have to scribble down all the resources, but there's a nice video done by Addison County River Watch Collaborative about how to sample. State of the Lake report is really interesting, just regarding water quality in general. And if you're interested more in the biological side of what happens with all these nutrients when they get into the lake, eutrophication, there's a couple nice videos on YouTube about what eutrophication is and sort of what it does to our aquatic life. All right, so next steps, just contact me if you want to help and you aren't already on my list. I think most of you, or maybe all of you, already are on my list, but reach out if you want to be assigned to a site and you're not already. And then I will send out that email. It'll include a few different things. As I mentioned, all those resources. We have a Hold Harmless form that hopefully you can just sign, virtually on your computer, or you can print off and mail back to me. It just says, that LCA is not liable, I guess, if you fall in the stream or twist your ankle or whatever happens out there. And tell me what supplies you need out of my attic or anywhere else. Mark your calendars for those sampling dates. And I did want to send out, I'm going to try to put together a little survey just to hear from you guys about, what's working and what doesn't work well for this sampling. Would love to get feedback from you on what would you like to see more of or less of, or what would, make you happy. So I will put together a little survey and send that out in that email as well. And you guys can just kind of stay tuned for more info. So that is the end of me talking. So I'm happy to take any questions or show you guys, show you guys more info on our data from last year. Those are all possibilities as well.
Kate, I have a question. This is Lynn. It's really helpful, the great presentation. For sites, when you're new to the site, will someone show us exactly where you want the sample taken? Or do we just kind of use our best judgment from the map?
Yeah, we'll get someone to show you guys for sure where to go, and whether that's me or maybe Louis. Louis doesn't know he's getting called upon to do that, but he is. And make sure that we're in the right spot. On some of the sites in the past, we have flagged them or put like photos out there, so I do have some documentation for some of the sites that show photos of like where to go and that kind of thing, or they have a really good description, like 50 meters downstream of the bridge or whatever it is, but they're not all like that, unfortunately. So we'll make sure you get some good info. All right.
Make sure you check for ticks when you come back from sampling.
Yep.
And watch out for poison parsnip.
Yep,
or poison ivy or any of the other.
I'm assuming that the Addison County River Collaborative is going to do the other streams they usually do. Will the dates if you want to do both with them and with you, are those going to conflict?
They might, yeah. I think we're planning to sample the same days because we drop off to the same person, the same location who brings it to the lab. So I suspect they might be the same dates, unfortunately.
Okay, so for those of us who might want to do that or whatever, we should just check with them and then with you. And
yeah, I think so.
It works. Okay.
Yeah, if we can make it work, that's great.
Sure.
Yeah, hopefully it can work out.
Okay. Yep.
Peter, you should have gotten an email from Matt on when our training. We have some trainings coming up also.
Yeah.
I was thinking that the dates didn't coincide, but maybe they do. I'll have to check on it.
Yeah, I'll check with Matt too.
Did you mention what your dates are yet, or is that what you don't know yet?
Yeah, so I mean, hopefully they start April 25th or 9th. I gotta look back at my presentation now. April 25th would be the first one, and then every other week to August 1st. Yeah,
sure, great.
And there may be a day or two in there where I have to switch things around just due to my schedule or being out of town or whatever, but I'll keep you guys apprised of that. We do have our state training tomorrow, so we'll, hopefully learn some more info from them at that point too.
Thanks, Kate. That was a good refresher.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Judy.